Did I overreact to my boyfriend's lack of communication? Was I right to break up with my boyfriend for lack of communication? So, I, 27F, broke up with my boyfriend, 31M, technically on Monday, over text. Together for officially 6 months, though we were talking and seeing each other for a couple months before then. For context, we met whilst traveling. I moved abroad and now live in the same city as him, have been in the same city now since December. He has been seeing a therapist recently and was diagnosed with anxiety and PTSD and was given medication for this. He had an abusive ex and his father was abusive towards his mother and still causes issues with his family. Though he says he has moved on from the past and doesn't think about it much. Related to this, last Monday his family had a court hearing to do with his dad and my BF, and his mom were happy with the result. My BF is also helping his mom start the divorce process, though his parents have been separated for years and he doesn't see his dad much. The issue with communication has been brought up before, though not to this extreme. Just not updating me on when he'll be seeing me and if he's late, etc. On Wednesday last week, I called him. He didn't answer and said he'd call later. Later came, and it was past the time he'd usually call. So I called again. I asked why he didn't call, and this is when he said he was feeling overwhelmed and was stressed over dealing with family issues. I'm leaving out the details. We spoke about it. I said just communicate that if he needs space. Then he mentioned that on the weekend he might be going to visit his brother in another city and asked if I wanted to come. He had mentioned a few times that we will do this together this month. He also said his family from overseas would be there, and he'd have to see them. I haven't met any of his family yet, FYI. I didn't say yes or no to coming cause he wasn't sure yet. Thursday, I didn't hear from him in the morning, so I texted a simple hello. A couple hours later he replied, "How are you, X?" And I said I was all right and asked how he was. No reply and no call that night. Friday morning I call, and he doesn't answer. Usually I'll hear something from him if he can't answer the call or if he was asleep. Hours go by and I send a text asking for more communication as I needed to feel connection and telling him if he needs space then simply ask for it. I was feeling really upset at this point. Again he doesn't reply and I turn my phone off to get some sleep that night. That night he calls after 11 p.m. but my phone was off. He texts saying he tried to call. Saturday morning I text saying to just LMK when he can see me in person to talk. At this point I'm very upset and frustrated. Then, I see on his shared location that he's going to the city where his brother lives to stay the weekend. Without updating me, he decided to go without me. I text at 3 p.m. and ask why he didn't tell me. No reply until 10 p.m. He says, "Hey, hope you're okay, and I'm sorry I had to come see my family. I'll be home tomorrow." I text back that I'm hurt and unhappy and remind him that he's been saying for weeks that he wanted to go to the city together so I can meet his brother. I then send a long text of how his silence and inability to communicate has been hurting me and makes me feel like he doesn't care. He calls me and starts talking about his day, then apologizes when I ask if he's gonna address how he's been treating me. He says we should talk in person about it, so I say goodnight. Sunday, we don't communicate at all. I don't try to reach out BC. I don't want to stress him more in case he still is stressed. I see on his location that he gets home around 9 p.m. Monday, this week, I don't hear from him and I don't try to initiate contact. That night is when I send a breakup text saying he didn't try to organize a time to meet and he is still not communicating and respecting my needs. But I end it by saying we can talk in person if he wants. He replies, "Yeah, I really fucked up, sad face," and he tries to call but I missed it as I was cooking dinner. And I reply, "Thanks for letting me know that you knew what you were doing," as that is what I interpreted from his text. And he asks if I'm working tomorrow. I say yes. Tuesday, there is no contact between us. Wednesday, I ask him to stop sharing location as I kept checking it. He says, "You want to cut off from me completely, sad face," and I say that if I want to move on I should. He says we still care about each other, and so should share location to make sure we're okay. I reply, "Ik, what you want from me? You've given no indication that you wanted to make this work. In fact, I believe you wanted me to end things. I can check on you by texting if I really need to, but how am I supposed to move on when I can see where you're all the time? I'm also wanting to block you for at least a little while." He didn't reply to this. I unfollowed him on Instagram and tried blocking him. I then became vulnerable that night, unblocked, and texted saying I'm hurt and don't understand how he can make someone he loves feel like this, and asked him if he actually wanted me to end it by staying silent. He calls me and explains that he's just been stressed and didn't want to leave his house too long to be there for family, and his feelings hadn't changed for me. I kept reiterating that all he needed to do was communicate that. He also said he didn't tell me about London because he assumed it would make me upset. He also didn't believe that we could break up over text, and he wants to call me tomorrow and explain his thinking, and then come and try and see me. The next day he doesn't call. I try to call later at night. He doesn't answer. I send some texts as I'm furious at myself for believing him. I say I should have known he would disappoint me again and not do what he said he would. And my last text was, I guess I had too high expectations for you, believing you would have basic human decency to call when you said you would after all this. He didn't reply to this, and I haven't heard from him. I have spoken to my family, and they believe I wasn't being selfish and asking too much, and they think his reason for no contact wasn't valid and he could have done what I asked as it was the bare minimum. I keep overthinking and prevent myself from accepting that it's over. I keep thinking I overreacted despite my relatives reassuring me. Was I wrong to end it? I want to note that he tells me he loves me when we are together and has mentioned a couple times that we could move in together in the near future. He also has expressed wanting to marry and have kids with me.